Hello, and welcome to Chasing Energy, where we provide insights for you to fuel a life worth living. This is episode number 11 with our guest, Terry Tucker. I'm Daniel Lucas by day and by trade. I am a VP of Innovation. I was an endurance athlete and an ultra runner for a little over a decade, and now I focus on sharing practical and sustainable insights on mindset, nutrition, and training. Today's guest is Terry Tucker. He was a NCAA Division I basketball player. He has a really interesting career where he's gone from thing to thing to thing of being a SWAT team negotiator, a narcotics investigator, a basketball coach for high school, a business owner, and more recently, a cancer warrior. And that's why Terry's on the podcast today. He has a lot to share. He does not have a lot of time left with us, and he is trying to get the message out of excellence. What does it mean to achieve excellence? A little bit of background here. Terry's been battling a rare form of cancer for about 10 years, and it started at his foot and had progressed up. His foot and leg have both been amputated, and in fact, just to schedule this interview, we had to do it around his heavy treatments of going to the hospital and back. It took 2 or 3 tries to get this thing on the books because of his schedule and mine, and I'm really grateful he made the time to do this. Mostly what I think you will get from this interview is assessing yourself and asking yourself some hard questions about, am I really doing the right things to get to the next level of my life? Taking a hard look at that and surrounding yourself with the kind of people who are going to hold you to that level of accountability. Terry doesn't have a lot of time left, so he wanted to make sure that he sort of paid it forward with the sort of team dynamics that he learned from a combination of his different careers and how it can help you get to the next level of excellence. So on the topic of working towards excellence, I use this podcast as a platform to sort of challenge myself as to how I can achieve excellence and share things with other people and hold myself to a higher standard. So I'm going to read a review today, and I challenge you to give me some feedback. If you see it on social media, feel free to be candid about what is or isn't working about this podcast. If you want to leave a review, I would very much appreciate it. I'm going to read today's review from Ketmaster. If you're here, you're probably looking for something, and it's like Chasing Energy has that one thing, just one thing you need to upgrade your energy level. As someone who is a year into consistent meditation practice and years of endurance training, I recently started incorporating cold showers into my morning routine. Oh, thanks, Callan McGibbon, by the way, who left that tip. Based primarily on what I learned from this podcast, it has really taken my meditation and energy level up a notch. I love the variety of topics and hosts. Nice to add to my podcast list. Thank you, Ketmaster. Very kind and informative review. I appreciate the feedback, and I am trying the cold showers. It is the middle of winter here, and I'm struggling with how cold they are right now, but I have to say, every time I step out, I go, man, I'm glad I did that. I feel invigorated. I'm ready to take on the day. All right, Terry Tucker, thank you so much for being on Chasing Energy, buddy. Good to see you today.
You too, Daniel. Thanks a lot. I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
And I'm looking forward to learning from you, Terry. I've been excited about this interview. I've been taking some notes from your book. I've also, we've had conversations before where we talked about some important takeaways. And I'd like to start with you sharing your story with who Terry Tucker is and how he got to where he is today.
Sure. So you can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall. I was born and raised in Chicago, and I'm the oldest of 3 boys. I have another brother who's 6'7", who was a pitcher for the University of Notre Dame. I have another brother who's 6'6" and was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the National Basketball Association. And then my dad was 6'5". So I sort of joke that if you sat behind our family in church growing up, there wasn't a prayers chance you were going to see anything that was going on whatsoever. But my 5'8" mother was the boss. It didn't matter how big, tall, strong, whatever we were, whatever mom said, that's the way it went. So I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to play college basketball at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. despite having 3 knee surgeries in high school. When I graduated from the Citadel, I moved home. I'm really going to date myself. This was long before the internet was available. And I was, all set to make my mark on the world with my newly obtained business administration degree. And as you and I were talking prior to the recording, I realize now kind of what a knucklehead I was to think I knew anything about business just because I had this degree. But fortunately, I did find that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International in their marketing department. But unfortunately, I ended up living with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mom care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. In my professional career, I had the first job at Wendy's, then I became a hospital administrator, and then I made a major pivot into my life because I really was kind of following my dreams at this point, and that was to become a police officer. And I did that. I ran a beat in a uniform in a marked car. I was an undercover narcotics investigator. I was a SWAT team hostage negotiator at one point. I also had my own school security consulting business. I coached girls' high school basketball, been a motivational speaker. Last year became an author. And unfortunately, for the last, 10 years now, I have been what I consider myself a cancer warrior. And then finally to round it out, my wife and I have been married for 28 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is a lieutenant in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
That's right. And I believe she's 25, right?
She is.
Yeah. So Terry, let's start by talking about the title of your book, which is Sustainable Excellence. And I've heard you say before that your inspiration for doing this book was that someone asked you for advice and you didn't want to give them a canned version of, get up early and work hard. All those principles are true, but you wanted to give something deeper than that. Can you elaborate a little bit about what draws you to share these type of principles with people?
Yeah, I've always felt that, the title Sustainable Excellence, people have, well, what does that mean? And I talk about that in the introduction to the book, that excellence, kind of like beauty, is sort of in the eye of the beholder. Daniel, you may say somebody's excellent at something. I may look at them and say, yeah, they're good, but I don't think they're excellent. So it really is kind of a subjective kind of look at in terms of, yeah, that person's great or good, that person's excellent, or they're just okay, whatever that ends up being. So I've always wanted to be part of the best, regardless. And that's one of the reasons I joined the SWAT team. They got the best training, they got the best equipment, and I wanted to be part of the best. I always had that aspiration in basketball and things like that. So a lot of people get to be excellent. They get to the pinnacle of whatever it is, business or sports. And what do? They stay there. Okay, we're gonna be good. We won the national championship in football. Okay, good. We're excellent. We're at the top of our game. But in order to continue that, in order to sustain that excellence, you've got to get better. You've got to improve. You can't just say, "Hey, we won the national championship. Here's our trophy. Look at us." That's great, because next year, if you want to repeat on that, you're going to have to get better, because people are going to understand why you did that last year, and they're going to put in plays and things like that, defenses, to prevent you from doing that. So you've got to change. You've got to get better. So it's always been something that's, I guess, in my soul, for lack of a better word, that I wanted to be part of something that was excellent. And when I find these little tidbits and these little things that I think make a difference in people's lives, I want to share them with other people.
Okay, so let's unpack some of that. It's about people taking a hard look at what they've accomplished and then saying, how do I build on this to continue, as opposed to becoming stagnant? It's about thinking what the next level is in your life. And as in sports, as we mature, the hero's journey, we try to hopefully become more of the mentor and less of the warrior as things progress. And we want to share it, which sounds like what you're doing is you're turning into here are the lessons I learned. Here are what I apply to my life. I also think of when you talk about, you know, what your inspiration is. I do think a lot of Vince Lombardi type things of, and in fact, one of your principles is, I have it here, it's put your God and your family before everything else, right? And Lombardi's famous first speech was, if you recall, it was, you have your religion, you have your family, and then there's the Green Bay Packers. And so that's just to put things in perspective of excellence should be in the right order. And if things are in the right order, it makes it much more achievable, right?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I mean, there are so many other things that are more important than just being good or excellent at something. And,
Right.
I think those things are, our relationships with our God, with each other, the love that we have for our fellow man and how we want to help our, I've always believed that regardless of what we do in our lives, that service, how we help other people, not just ourselves, is
Yeah.
really why we were put on the face of this earth in the first place.
Yeah, that's a good point, Terry. Excellence doesn't have to be you're able to run faster than you were last year, or you rank higher in a particular sport. It needs to be, I don't want to become the kind of person, and you can correct me on here, I'm paraphrasing you, but it sounds like it's, don't be the type of person who rests on your past laurels and what you've already done and says, I'm ready to go off into the sunset. Just I can hang my hat and that's it. Certainly from a career, or especially a sports career, there's always the time to step away from it. But then there's what's the next level of excellence in your life, right?
Yeah, and regardless of what that is, and I think, I've always believed that I needed to earn my jersey when I was playing,
Yeah.
every day. It's like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, I was good yesterday. Well, I've got to earn that again today. It's
Hmm.
it's sort of that, it's day one, week one mentality. We're starting over every single day, and just because I was good yesterday doesn't mean I'm going to be good today. So, yeah, regardless of what you do in your life, I think it's important to kind of find your passion, find your purpose. What, I believe, in God. I'm not going to put that on anybody else if they don't, but I think God put us here with all of us with unique gifts and talents to become the best person that we're capable of becoming. And you mentioned, sort of the impetus to my book. One was with a conversation with a former player. And when I told her, I'm like, look, she moved to the area where my wife and I are living. I said, look, I'm really glad that you're here because I can watch you find and live your purpose. And she got real quiet for a while and she looked at me and she was like, well, coach, what do you think my purpose is? Like, I have no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about,
That's
finding
right.
the reason you were put on this earth and then living that reason with your unique gifts and talents.
Right. And the search for purpose is a very, very underestimated part. Getting the purpose or accomplishing this or that, to me, there's that old phrase, life is what happens while you're making other plans, right? That's a John Lennon quote. And focusing on the journey itself versus the destination. Uh, Terry, there's so many truths in there we could expand on. One thing I do want to say is how you actually chose to write this book during a time where you were in heavy treatments. And in fact, I heard you jokingly say, most people would have been just relaxing and having bonbons, but you chose to channel the setback into something that's going to help other people. And you're right. So many of us, when we have setbacks, there is a dichotomy of emotions that says, you can sulk. You didn't deserve this. You didn't do anything to bring this on. It is okay to be angry. And then I think what you heard, Terry, was probably something similar, but then you said, okay, but how can I help other people? How can I use this to help other people? And how do I channel this frustration and energy into a greater good? As opposed to, and it's very common that you don't spend a lot of time asking why me. You've already moved, you've moved past that, and you'd much rather just focus on how do I share my message and how do I help other people, right?
Yeah, I don't, people have asked me, who do you blame? We're great as a society for wanting to blame somebody or something for us not achieving success. We don't
Yeah.
take our own responsibility for our own success and happiness. So we got to blame somebody, our parents, our status in life, our boss, whatever that ends up being. And I just got to the point where it's like, it's not worth blaming. It's not. And people have asked me, who do you blame for you getting cancer? I don't blame anybody. Do you blame God? No, I joke, and I think I've told you this before. I don't think God got up on a Tuesday morning, checked his to-do list and said, Terry Tucker's going to get cancer. I don't think that at all. But I do believe, based on my faith, that he's given me the ability to handle a lot of the garbage that I've gone through. So yeah, I think it's important for all of us to take responsibility for our own success and happiness. I mean, the world owes you nothing, absolutely nothing. And if you kind of live a casual life, then you're going to get nothing, because your dreams, your goals, your aspirations are going to become a casualty of kind of that unplanned living. And I definitely didn't want to be that. I wanted to be the person whose life mattered because of the decisions I made, not because of the decisions that somebody else made or that I didn't make for myself.
Amen to that, Terry. Terry, let's use that as a segue to talk about the four truths. So let's
Yeah.
start with controlling your mind, or it will control you. Why don't you elaborate a little bit on that?
So I learned this truth probably earlier in my life than I did some of the other ones. And when I was in high school, I was a pretty good basketball player, but I ended up having 3 knee surgeries. And when I went back to playing basketball, my brain started putting all these negative thoughts into my mind. And it would, things like, hey, wait a minute, you have 3 surgeries. You're probably a step slower. And college coaches aren't going to be interested in recruiting you because you've had all these surgeries. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm still playing at an elite level, and I'm still being contacted by coaches about potentially playing at their college or university. So I learned early that I needed to change that narrative. I needed to flip that switch to something positive. And, I remember back in college when, guys would go out and they'd party, the night before big
Hmm.
tests. And what always happened? They always came into the test, hungover, and they would say this, man, I'm going to blow this test. I mean, I am so wasted that I'm not going to do good on this test. And I used to think, why would you say that to yourself? I mean, your brain can hold one thought at a time.
Yeah,
Why would you make that a negative thought? Why wouldn't you at least give yourself the benefit of the doubt? Yeah, I paid attention in class. I understand this stuff pretty well. I'm going to do great on this test. But no, we always go to the negative. I'm going to
that's
blow
right.
it. I'm not going to be successful. And people have asked me, they've said to me, Terry, given everything you've been through, your foot amputated, your leg amputated, all those years on interferon, having the flu, I could never do what you did. And I always say, kind of flippantly, yeah, you're right. You could, because you've already decided in your mind that you can't do this. Why would you start something going into it negatively? You might as well
That's
just
right.
stay in bed and enjoy a couple extra hours of sleep. Why would you go through this? Why would you start something thinking you were going to fail? Nobody does that. But so many people have that kind of in the back of their mind. Ooh, I could fail. Yeah, you could fail. Great. Fail and learn something. As long as you fail and learn something, you didn't really fail.
Which, that ties into principle number 4, which is always remain curious and ask questions. And for me, failure was really reinterpreted in my later years, because I started looking at it as, okay, regardless of the outcome here, what am I going to learn from this? And that curiosity, constantly going back to being a curious person. And I don't want to digress onto this topic other than to say, it saddens me when you talk to somebody and they've lost the curiosity in life. They feel like, I pretty much know what I'm going to know. I've done it. And by the way, that's not just with the elderly. I mean, there's plenty of people I know that are my age that are saying, I've been there, done that. I'm just trying to go about my business and get through this. And going back to one of the themes that you just said, by the way, was don't default to a negative state. That's something you can put a check in place and say, when you encounter, either whether it's a surprise or with the test, they knew the test was coming, right? So having a check in place to say, am I defaulting to failure here? Am I giving myself an out before I've even fought? Right. Okay. So embrace the pain and the difficulty and use it to make you stronger, which is truth number 2. Why don't you give us a little bit on that, Terry?
Yeah, our brains are hardwired to avoid pain and discomfort and to seek pleasure. And so to the brain, the status quo, the way things are right now, they're good. Just keep things the way they are. But the only way we're going to grow, the only way we're going to get better is if you step outside that comfort zone. If you make yourself vulnerable. And I always recommended it, and I try to do this myself every single day, to do one thing. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. Maybe, hey, I'm going to get up at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning or 4 o'clock tomorrow morning. Or, you know what, I hate going to the dentist. I'm going to call and make an appointment because it's been past. Whatever that small thing is that scares you, that makes you nervous, that is potentially embarrassing, do that every day. Do at least one thing every day. So when the big stuff comes, and the big stuff comes for all of us, whether it's you lose somebody that's close to you, you're living out of your car, you've lost whatever it is, when you do those small things intermittently every single day, when the big things come, you'll be resilient and able to handle those. So basically what the embrace the pain and the suffering is, instead of running from pain, instead of trying to get away from it, do just the opposite. Flip it inside. Use that pain as fuel. Burn it as energy to make you a stronger and more determined individual. And, you're looking at me right now. There's no S on my chest. I do not wear a cape. I mean, I have bad days. There are days I'm down. There are days I cry. There are days I feel sorry for myself. But again, it's a choice as to how I want to handle it. And I just use that pain. And I am the biggest wimp in the world. So if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Well, I don't think we're going to argue about whether you're the biggest wimp or not, but I did read something a couple of years ago that helped me deal with setbacks, and specifically when I was convinced that I had a win planned, or an opportunity, and it just fell apart. And I was a very optimistic person. I assumed I had it made. And it was this. It was, if you fail, give yourself a window for sulking and then so for example, say, I have 24 hours to mourn the loss of this, with the rule that after that 24 hours, I am no longer allowed to sulk. And I found that, I'm not saying 24 hours is the right amount of time, pick whatever, but I found that putting that limit on myself was almost like a rule I put in place to say, look, you got, in fact, just the other day, I got a parking ticket, and I was like, you got about 60 seconds to be upset about this, and then I want you to move on and put it away. And if I don't even think I needed 60 seconds once I said, oh, it really is ridiculous. And the more that I give this, I mean, that seems obviously a very far contrast from the topic we're talking about with you, Terry, but the principle remains in terms of building resilience for larger things, which is, I give myself some understanding here, but not enough for that I'm going to allow myself to just wallow in it. I want to be strong, learn from it, and move on, right? So let's go to the next one. What you leave behind is what you weave into the hearts of other people. Very big on legacy, right, Terry?
I am. I think it's, regardless of where we are in our lives, I think it's important to sort of think about the end game. And when I found out I was going to have my leg amputated and that I have these tumors in my lungs, I went with my wife to the mortuary, to the cemetery, to the funeral home, or to the church, and I planned my funeral. And I go on podcasts and I talk about, continuing to move forward and motivation and things like that. And I got some pushback from some people. It was like, you plan your funeral. I mean, don't you think that's kind of defeatist, And I kind of used to smile when people would say that. I was like, well, last time I checked, we're all going to die. I
Yeah.
don't think anybody's working on a cure for life right now, but we're all going to die, but we're not all going to really live. And
Mhm.
I heard a Native American Blackfoot proverb years ago that I love, and I'll give it to you. And it goes like this: when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. That's what I want. And I think the big words in there are live your life. Get out there and live the purpose for which you were put on the face of this earth. And if you do that, death is not that scary. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not looking to hesitate or to hasten, my demise by any means. But at the same time, if I were to go today, tomorrow, 6 weeks from now, I wouldn't be nearly as upset because I really feel that I've lived the purpose I was put
Mhm.
on this earth for. So as a result, I'm not really afraid of what's on the other side of this. I'm actually kind of excited to see what I believe is on the other side of this life.
So several things popped in my head there. There's a influencer by the name of Donald Miller. He actually lives in Nashville here. He runs a company called Business Made Simple, and he has started revealing lately that he has, for the last few years, been reading his own eulogy every morning. He has written it. He's not terminally ill or anything, but he wanted to make sure that everything he did on a daily basis lined up with the legacy that he is leaving behind. And you're right. It does come across as morbid. A lot of people don't want to think about death. And for me, I think that you're missing a lot when you don't think about death. And I think knowing that it's not eternal, knowing that the clock is ticking, knowing that there's only so many days left in our life, at best, by the way, does not include surprises. I'm a little bit of a health nut. That's part of the podcast, but I tell my children all the time, tomorrow isn't guaranteed for me. Anything can happen, health or otherwise. I have no idea. I try to control the things I can, but that's it. But back to the point of knowing what you want your legacy to be and building around that, making sure that the actions that you want to, and I'm using your words here, weave into the hearts of other people. What do I want that to be? I just spent a one-on-one day with just me and my son, and listen, he's 13. He doesn't like spending time with me, but I still find myself going, what do I want to impart on him so that because when I'm gone, I want him to think certain things about me. And that's something I have to sit there and go, how do I break through to this person? How do I weave into his heart? His heart ain't easy to get to. A 13-year-old is not easy to get to.
Yeah,
Uh,
we were all 13, and
I know. And believe me when I say there's a certain bit of parental karma that I go, oh gosh, I kind of deserve some of this stuff. So let's go on to principle 4. As long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated.
yeah, I think in a lot of ways that's self-explanatory, but I guess the way I sort of present that is, you know, at some point my pain is going to end. It may end through surgery, may end through medication. Quite frankly, it may end when I die. But if I quit, if I give up, if I give in to pain, then pain will always be a part of my life. And it may not be physical pain. I'm thinking there more of the psychological pain of, man, if I would have just done this, if I would have just kept going, if I would have, taken one more step, and now you're living with the pain of regret. And,
Mhm.
if and that's a horrible, horrible thing to live with. And I've been asked, do you have any regrets? And in all honesty, I have very few, but the ones I have were the times when I felt that I was being selfish and my selfishness led to somebody else getting hurt. Again, I'm
Mhm.
not telling you to live your life based on what other people say or think or do. You have to live a life that's true to yourself.
Yeah.
But again, keeping in mind that I believe that service is why we were put here. Are you doing that? Or are you doing what you want to do? And as a result, other people got injured or hurt along the way. And for me, that's the biggest regret that I live with.
Yeah. So So Terry, let's shift gears here a little bit. I was thinking about you today, actually. You were on interferon for, was it 4 years and 7 months?
Yep, almost 5
Oh,
years. Yep.
okay. And it gave you flu-like symptoms three-ish days of the week, right? And I was thinking about what a traumatic side effect that was. I watched my father slowly die, and we went from different medications, and I can tell you that side effects was a very hot topic for him. Of is this real? Is this side effect worth what it's given me? Um, Tell me a little bit with when you were on the interferon, what was it that made you hold on to the next treatment and not say, I need to wrap this. I don't feel this is worth it.
I think in a lot of ways it was what I call my three F's: faith, family, and friends. And I guess I need to sort of preface that with there were literally days when I was on interferon that I prayed to die. I literally was like, please, God, just take me out of this. I am so sick of being sick. And, cancer has a tendency to isolate people just because of the disease. But, I would be, sitting on the couch and my wife would be like, just sit at the table with us. I know you don't feel like eating, but sit at the table. And I would get a smell, mashed potatoes or a broccoli or something like that. I'd be like, no, I've got to go. I've got to go throw up. And I know that sounds a little guttural, but it was like, well, now even my treatment is isolating me from the people that I love and that I care about. So it was it was horrible, but for me, it got to the point where, yes, I have this faith in God. Do you want me to stay here? Like I said, I begged him to take me. He didn't take me. So now give me the strength to help me get through this. And then there's my family. And I joke sort of, although this really kind of happened this way when I had my leg amputated, my doctor wanted to start me on chemotherapy for the tumors in my lungs. And I asked him, I said, well, is it going to save my life? And he was like, no, probably not, but it's at least going to buy you some more time. And I'm like, I don't think I want to do that. I don't think I want to go down that road if the outcome is going to be the same. And I mean, you saw it with your dad. And so I was like, no, I don't think I want to do it, but I'll go home and talk to my family. And I went home and I started to tell my wife and daughter what was going on. And my daughter's immediately, hey, we got to have a family meeting. I'm like, family meeting, there's three of us. It's not like we got a board here or something like that.
Yeah.
It was, so we sat around the kitchen table and we gave our perspectives on me taking chemotherapy. And then my daughter's like, all right, let's think about how many people want dad to have chemotherapy. And my wife and daughter raised their hand and I'm like, wait a minute, am I getting outvoted for something that I don't want to do? And I remembered back when I was in the police academy, our defensive tactics instructor had us bring a photograph of the people that we loved the most to class.
Yeah.
And we were going to look at that photograph as we were learning ways to defend ourselves because he reasoned you will fight harder for the people you love than you will fight for yourself. So I ended up taking chemotherapy, even though I didn't want to, because my wife and daughter, who mean more to me, in all honesty, than I mean to myself, wanted me to do that.
Okay, so that's an interesting story. I hadn't heard that. So how you got outvoted and you decided to go on the chemo. What made you overturn that vote eventually?
It was literally because my wife and daughter was like, no, we're not ready to lose you yet. We don't want, knowing that if I don't do this, I mean, these tumors are going to grow in my lungs. They're going to get bigger and they're going to take my life.
Right. But are you still doing that treatment or no?
No, I moved off of chemotherapy. I am on a clinical trial drug now that
Okay. I follow
more
now.
than
So
likely isn't going to.
right.
Yeah,
You've transitioned to something else. I didn't
I
know
did.
if you had just stopped treatment altogether. Okay.
No.
Yeah. I like that. I think of a lot of, I also like the story of how when you ran the marathon, how if you were struggling, you had to say a certain word, right? Go ahead and give us a little bit about that.
So I started a blog back in 2019 and I was looking for a name. And again, going back to a police academy story, we had a defensive tactics instructor that put us through some really tough times, including running a marathon. And even the stuff that was in the gym, the PT room, it was some really difficult things. And he devised a saying called motivational check. And it was
Mhm.
something that anybody could yell out at any time if they were hurting, if they were like, I just don't think I can get through this. I'm having a tough day, whatever it was. And the rest of the class would respond with an 84. We were the 84th recruit class, just to let that person know that, hey, you're not alone. We're all hurting. We're all going to get through this, but we're going to get through it together. Hang in there. So when I was deciding on a title for my blog, it seemed to me that motivational check would be, it meant something to me. I know it doesn't mean a lot to other people without the story behind it, but motivational check is what I call my blog. And that was a direct result of this defensive tactics instructor saying, hey,
Mhm.
I know you're going to have a bad day, but when you do, yell out this phrase because we're here for you.
I like that. Terry, I have problems with internalizing my struggles and not sharing them with other people and saying, I as alone as the man and the leader it's my alone burden to bear. But you bring up a very good point, which is to have a circle where you can do a motivational check, to paraphrase you, and just say, I feel like I need a pat on the back here, emotionally or physically. And, Mel Robbins' new book is based on, she's a motivational speaker as well. And her whole principle is giving yourself a high five in the morning in the mirror they did these tests on people. And so I've actually, since then, I have forced my kids to start giving me high vibes every time they accomplish something. I'm trying not to be overly, I don't over compliment. I don't think I'm not that new age yet, but I do compliment them and make sure that they understand they're being acknowledged and they're not alone. The last thing I'll say about that is that when you think about leveraging in a good way, that the sum of your struggles is more about someone else than yourself. And at least in our case as fathers, right? And when several years ago, I went through a bout with about 6 months of depression. And I never allowed myself to get caught up in it, even though it was terrible. But I just told myself when it started and all the way up to by the way, it started as fast as it ended. I mean, just like a snap. But uh, I just told myself, you have kids to take care of. You don't have time to dwell on this. When you're in bed alone, that's your time to think about it. But everything else, you have to do this for the kids. And I wanted the kids to look back at their father and you're talking about weaving the legacy, right? Of what we want them to be in their hearts. I wanted them to look back on the father and say, my father was someone who was strong. And when things were not good, they never knew it because I didn't allow myself to dwell on it. Keep in mind, my kids were very young at this time. So it wasn't like they were 25 and got to vote on a situation. So,
Yeah, and I think that what you're saying, or at least what I'm hearing you say, is that your kids, for you, that's part of something that's bigger than yourself. And that's one thing I learned in team sports. I started playing basketball when I was 9 years old, played all the way up till I was 21. And you realize that, if you don't do your job on a team, not only do you let yourself down, but you're letting your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, et
mhm,
cetera. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life. And I think it's important, there's a lot of criticism, especially among young people today, that, hey, it's all about me. Well, guess what? It's not all about you
yeah,
because you individually can't do anything.
yeah,
Us collectively together can do anything we put our minds to. And we're not designed to be loners. We're designed to be with other people. We're designed to be vulnerable because people will learn from that. And I think that's okay. It's okay. My daughter and I haven't shared this with you. My daughter and her husband literally left us yesterday to move to Florida. And I'm hurting right now. I
yeah,
mean, I love my daughter. I love being around her. And I remember last night going to bed and just thinking, gosh, the house is just so much
yeah.
quieter. It's so much darker than when she was here just a few hours ago. And it's like, yeah, this sucks. But sometimes in life, you got to embrace that suck and you got to use it to make you a better individual.
Yeah. Wow. Empty nesting it, huh, Terry? So back to what you were saying about the solopreneurs of the modern generation. Look, I look at the Gen Zs and I try to understand them. I know there's a couple of generations between me and them, and I do have a hard time connecting. There's a bittersweet edge to this sort of it's all about me. And on the extreme, it's like you said, they think about themselves. How does this benefit me? And how am I going to get what I want? On the pro side, when I was growing up, at least a young man working in factories as an IT guy, you never questioned when someone gave you an order. It was just, hey, you're going to do this or you're going to lose your job. And this generation won't do that. They'll pretty much say, if you don't treat me with respect, I'm out of here. So there's a whole different school of mentality there. I did come up in my head when you were talking about team. I remembered the quote, which was Newton. And it was, if I've seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants, right? And I think about anyone who says, yeah, I'm a self-made man. I look at that and go, man, surely there are people who have been in your corner and on your team and helped you get to where you are. And Napoleon Hill, having that surrounding yourself with the type of people who are gonna hold you accountable to excellence, right, Terry? You started off this interview talking about how you want to help people get past the stagnant plateaus, being complacent, resting on your laurels, and get to the next level. And a lot of that is surrounding yourself with your peers who are going to expect that from you versus try to pull you down when you try to achieve excellence.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I always say Daniel, if I didn't know you, but I knew the 5 people you hung around with the most, I could pretty much tell you a lot about the person that you were. And, I always tell, especially people, if you're hanging around people that don't have your best interest in mind, that don't care about you, that aren't uplifting you, that aren't willing to tell you the truth, then get those people out of your life and surround yourself with those people that will do
Mhm.
that to you. And the problem with that is, when somebody, steps up and says, hey, Terry, you're really kind of messing this up. What do? It's like, oh, get lost. You're not my friend anymore. Oh no, trust me. Those are the people who are your
Yeah.
friend. Those are the people who are willing to risk their relationship with you to be honest because they love you enough and care about you enough that they want you to be successful.
Yeah. I love that, Terry. And I do tell my children they're nauseous when they hear me say this so much, but I tell them, I'm not here to be your best friend. I'm here to help you live a better life. Your friends, at least most of them are going to tell you what you want to hear. And I'm not here to do that. I'm here to help you get better and prepare you for the world. Like your daughter's just moved out and now you get to know that you have prepared her for life in a way that she's going to carry, the principles that you taught her
Right.
in a sense, which I know this is a little on the woo woo side, but in a sense, I heard this the other day, you never die because what you have taught goes on to the next generation and the next generation. So the time and the principles and the leadership that you've put in will continue to move forward. Taking pride in that is a good way of knowing, like you said, when the world cries and you rejoice, taking pride in that is a big part of knowing that you've done the right thing. And while I feel a lot of people are uncomfortable with saying they have regrets in life, it's actually very popular for people to say, I have no regrets. I don't understand that myself. To me, if you don't have any regrets, you didn't take enough
Right.
chances or you learned from every single mistake you ever made, which is very impressive. I've certainly committed the same mistake twice, but regrets to me are part of the curve. And in fact, the pain that comes from them, I mean, that's a big part of what we do as parents. We're trying to prevent them from experiencing so much of the mistakes we made. But as you know, Terry, a lot of that, at some point, that kid has to touch a hot stove to realize you're just not going to be able to emotionally convey why it's important they don't.
Yeah,
So
and I bet, my wife and I always tried to stay away from, the whole helicopter parent. As
yeah,
soon as something
yeah,
went wrong and our daughter's like, swoop in and make it right. No, there were times when
yeah,
things would go wrong and she was being bullied when she was in middle school and she would come home and tell us about it. It was like, you know, and it was kind of like, good. Let's see how this
yeah,
goes. Let's
yeah,
see how you handle this. Have we given you the tools necessary to handle this? And there would be times we'd be like, do you want mom and I to get involved? Nope, I'll take care of it. Okay, good.
Yeah.
I mean, don't kill the girl, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you can handle this. And I knew she could. And I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, my daughter got my height and what was tall and that. So eh,
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, same thing I had. I was 13 years old. I was 6'5". I had a size 14 real narrow shoe, and my ears looked like Dumbo. My head had not caught up with my ears. And I got teased mercilessly, but I put that, all that vile and the way people were treating me into playing basketball, into practicing basketball, and it did something positive with it. I still felt bad. I still, felt bad when kids would make fun of my ears and things like that. But okay, I could do something positive with it. And my parents gave me that gift, that skill, whatever you want to say, to hey, yeah, that's part of life. People aren't going to like you. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to be resilient? And for me, it was, to focus on basketball. For other people, they have other talents and traits that they use. And some people, goes back to what we were talking about. Some people wallow in it. Some people can't get past it. And again, don't surround yourself with those people. Surround yourself with the people that care about you,
Mhm.
that lift you up, not the people that are tearing you down.
On that note, Terry, I think about when someone complains about one of their friends getting them into trouble or dragging them down on multiple occasions, meaning it's not a one time thing. There's a phrase I heard from Tony Robbins years ago, which was, you lay down with the dogs, you wake up with fleas. And that's what I very much spit that statement out when I start seeing people who are suffering because they're in the wrong company. Now, the flip side to that is you pick your friends, you love your family. So if it's someone you're related to, get over it. If it's your brother, your sister, your mom, your dad, your uncle, you have to learn how to handle that person in your life and still be connected to that person without letting them drag you down to a lower level. And I if you don't have any relatives like that, good on you. Good on you. But being aware of it, but also putting it in perspective that, blood is thicker than water, and being aware of your friends. How are they steering you? I do want to make an honorable mention. My first aired podcast was with a gentleman by the name of Shay Eskew, and he wrote a book called With the Fire Ignited. And Terry, I thought about you when you were talking about your cancer and how it's made you the person you are today. When he was 9, his skin was burned off. So he's had 23 surgeries. He's a motivational speaker now. He's a very, very good triathlete. I've raced with him before, and I can vouch for that. But he very frequently says, I'm so glad this accident happened to me because it made me into a person I don't think I ever could have been without the accident. So going back to our legacy here, taking those setbacks and saying, how do I leverage this to be the person I want to be, right? How do I take this cancer and show that I am, as in your words, a cancer warrior, right? And going up against cancer is a battle. It is a regular battle. It's nothing sexy like we see in the movies with the two legions of men that battle and then it's over. It's a day-to-day ongoing thing. Terry, I want to wrap this up by asking a question that I've started asking some of my guests, and that is, if you're in a coffee shop or out and about and someone comes up to you and says, Terry, I'm really struggling with my energy on a day-to-day basis. I either feel unfocused or lethargic or whatever. What is your general advice to that person?
I guess I'll sort of end it with this story. I remember recently reading about a professor at Johns Hopkins University back in the 1950s who did a very simple experiment with rats. Now, hang with me. I know he's like, what the heck's he talking about rats for? But this works. So, and the experiment was this. He took rats and he put them in water that were over their head. And he wanted to see how long rats would tread water. And the average rat treaded water for about 15 minutes. And just as the rat was getting ready to sink and drown, he reached in, grabbed it, pulled it out, dried it off, let it rest for a while. And then he put that same rat in that exact same tank of water. And the second time around, those rats treaded water for 60 hours. Think about that. All I can do is 15 minutes. I'm at the end of my rope. I'm going to die. What? Somebody came in and helped me, which when I read about that, I thought, no, this has got to be one of those things on the internet that really isn't true. So I went and researched it, and everything I've been able to find says this actually happened. This is a true story, a true experiment, which says to me two things. One, the importance of hope in our lives. We have to believe
Yeah.
that we're moving forward, or we're moving towards something that's going to make our life better. And two, just how much more our physical bodies can handle than we ever thought that they could. I have a friend who's a former Navy SEAL, some of the toughest men in the world. And the SEALs talk about what they call their 40% rule. And that basically means when they're at the end of their rope, and these are some pretty tough individuals, that they're only at 40% of their maximum. And they
Mhm.
still have 60% left to give to themselves. So whenever I get in those spots where I'm like, oh man, this is, I'm sort of at the end of my rope, I always remember that, you know what? No, you're not at the end of your rope. You can do so much more than you ever thought that you could do.
Mhm.
Everything you need to be successful in life is already inside you. You just have to find it, pull it out,
Yeah.
and use it to your advantage.
Absolutely. Wow, what a great way to wrap that story up, Terry. I think of people when you talk about something like that. I think of people like Stephen Hawking, who, spent 50 years completely with the use of one finger. It changed what we think of the world, the universe, and all those type of things. I do want to add one study to yours and say, it was a follow up on the Pavlov's dog study,
Okay.
and I don't know if you've heard of this one. It's where they had dogs that if they went from one side, if there was a beeping and then they went from one side of the court to the other. Actually, I know what it was. There was a dog collar they wore. If they heard some of them would be shocked no matter what they do. Some of them, if they walked to the other side of the court, the shocking would stop. So half the dogs would be shocked no matter what. Half of them could go to the other side of a tennis court. Well, the next phase of that was a tennis court that was electric. And they all had the option to go to the other side. And what they found was that the ones who initially had no choice but to take the shock just gave up. They didn't try anything. They didn't do anything. They would just sit, and they actually were considered very depressed dogs. That symptom is called learned helplessness. And it's a way of one of the things I take from learned helplessness means that at some point you have told yourself there is no point in me trying to carve a difference here, trying to make a difference. There's no point in me making a major effort. And I think that ties into what you're saying with the rats, which is by the way, even if it was just 1 hour, they were able to survive. That's
Right.
4 times the difference
Right.
because they were able to latch on to hope.
Right.
Terry, I hope that you have inspired people who hear this to look at around them and say all the opportunities for hope they have in their life and all the changes that they can impact and make the world a better place, such as you have by sharing your message with people like myself. Where would you like people to find you or connect with you, Terry?
Yeah, motivationalcheck.com will
Mhm.
pretty much get you to me. You can get to my social media sites there. You can get access to my book. You can leave me a note. So motivationalcheck.com is probably the easiest way to get to me.
Awesome, Terry. Be blessed, buddy, and stay in touch. I'm really proud of your journey, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me on, Daniel. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. So I want to wrap up this podcast by saying what's stuck with me the most and what I've been thinking about the most since I recorded that interview. For me, it was the study on the rats and the idea that thinking hope is around the corner, right? That if you just hang in there a little bit longer, things are going to be better. In my interview with Emma Ferris, she talked about breaking the day. If it's going to be a bad day or a hard day, she breaks it into sizable chunks like, I just need to get past this moment. And that's pretty much what I've been doing lately. I get stuck in a moment and I think to myself, I'm the drowning rat that's 14 minutes in, and I need to get a hold of myself and think, I've got a whole lot left in me. And my problems are not nearly as bad as a lot of other people's problems. So I just need to get to this moment. And I do feel like a rat in certain days treading water versus someone who's just sailing across the ocean. But the idea there is I'm looking at things now and going, are you giving up because you're truly drowning or because you're just tired? So I'll leave you with that. Until next time, have a great day.